Begin with the massive No Kings protests that swept the nation yesterday in advance of Trump's military parade. Thousands of protests, peaceful protests, were held in big cities and small towns in all 50 states. Seattle police said tens of thousands showed up. Officials in San Diego and Los Angeles estimated more than 20,000. 25,000 were said to have marched down Fifth Avenue in Manhattan. And a stunning 80,000 people were said to have marched in Philadelphia, according to local police, with no arrests made during the event. A clear message connected them all.
What we're seeing is this administration continue to run afoul of the law. What we want to do is steer the ship in the right direction in this moment and push back as hard as we can.
Being a daughter of immigrants, I feel like I need to show up and stand up and fight for what's right. You know, we have a country to honor, and everything that's happening right now is very unjust, and that's why we're here. We're the voice for those that cannot be heard, and that's why we're standing up. It's a privilege.
Because we see our democracy is in real trouble. We see a president who has made himself a king and dictator. And we don't see an opposition that's powerful enough to stand up against the trampling of our rights and the trampling of the Constitution that's happening every single day.
That was, of course, actor Mark Ruffalo there at the end. It culminated a week of unrest and anger across the country in the face of a stunning escalation of the Trump administration's overreach on multiple fronts. The indictment of a member of Congress, New Jersey Congresswoman LaMonica McIver, for attempting congressional oversight. The forcible removal of Democratic Senator Alex Padilla, the senior senator from California, from DHS Secretary Kristi Noem's press conference for trying to ask a question. And the federalizing of the National Guard, who, along with active duty Marines, are on the streets of Los Angeles, which had already led to protesters to take to the streets in opposition to Trump's immigration raids. Joining us now is Democratic Congressman and Marine veteran Seth Moulton of Massachusetts. Congressman, thank you for coming to the weekend. As I mentioned, you are a Marine veteran who is deployed overseas. Just your thoughts on what it means to you to see Marines deployed on the streets of an American city.
Well, it's unbelievably undemocratic. I think the courts will show that it's unconstitutional the way that Trump has gone about this. We've never had an instance of Marines deployed against peaceful protests like this in the past. There was a time about 30 years ago, 40 years ago, when Marines were deployed at the governor's request. I think about 80 people had already died in violent protests in L.A., and this is very different. The governor doesn't want the Marines to be there. But speaking as a veteran, I have to tell you, the Marines don't want to be there either. No one signs up to join the United States Marine Corps to attack protesters, to go against Americans on the streets of an American city. Just like no one signs up for the United States Army to march in a parade, by the way. That's not why you sign up to serve the country.
Congressman, the Marine deployment in L.A. is still just absolutely unbelievable to me that we're doing this. And I want to play some comments from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth this week in an exchange with your colleague, Ro Khanna.
Can you assure the American people on two things? You will respect any Supreme Court decision on this matter about whether the Marines are constitutional, and you will respect the district courts when they rule before the Supreme Court rules.
What I can say is we should not have local judges determining foreign policy or national security policy for the country.
So you're not willing to say you would respect those decisions?
What I'm saying is local district judges shouldn't make foreign policy for the United States.
Congressman, this is just incredible to me, just flouting the checks and balances of our government. What can Congress do here to have oversight over the most important duty of the commander-in-chief, and that's where he deploys troops?
Well, first of all, I mean, it's flouting the law, it's flouting justices. It's basically Pete Hegseth saying that he thinks that he and the administration are above the law. And that's always been the attitude of this administration. That's always been the attitude of Donald Trump. Politicize the military, use the military for their political goals, and show America that they are above the law. Congress, of course, should be stepping in and stopping this. But under Speaker Johnson in the House, I don't think we've seen a weaker Congress in maybe in American history in a very, very long time, because the Republicans simply refuse to take any accountability to fulfill their constitutional responsibilities to hold the executive in check. And it's dangerous for America. It's why it's so important that Democrats win the midterms, and why some of us are so focused on how to move the Democratic Party forward so that we can ensure victory and have some actual oversight from Congress.
Congressman, you know, I'm an Army brat, military brat, so I know how and just as you know, how much help that the VA needs, understand how much help the members of our armed services need, both while they're serving and after. $45 million for the President's Parade yesterday, around $140 million for the troop deployment in Los Angeles. I guess I'm just curious, what do you think we could do with that money? It's not, you know, this is for the federal government, it feels like pennies, but you're talking about nearly $200 million. What could that $200 million do for the members of our armed services?
It's a great question, because it could make a huge impact on the lives of individual troops and individual veterans. When I got elected to Congress, I made a commitment to continue getting my health care at the VA alongside my fellow Marines. And I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of the VA. I was on the phone with a Marine from my 2nd platoon earlier this week, because he's having trouble getting seen by the VA, even though he has tumors growing all over his body, something that's not uncommon among Iraq and Afghanistan veterans because of the things we were exposed to overseas. Imagine what a difference just a few $100,000 could make in his care. DOGE has cut millions of dollars from the VA, tens of thousands of employees, many of whom were added, by the way, by the Biden administration to meet the demands of Iraq and Afghanistan veterans. And so while you're right, $200 million might seem like a drop in the bucket when you're paying $13 billion a pop for aircraft carriers. When it comes down to taking care of our troops, it could be enormous. It could have an enormous impact. And this money has just been wasted on a spectacle.
Congressman, NBC News had a story on Friday with the headline, LAPD chief says there has been no coordination between police and military. Explain to viewers why that should concern them, and certainly should concern the people who live in Los Angeles.
Well, that's because this is a law enforcement job. And that's why the LA police did not request the Marines. That's why Governor Newsom did not request the Marines. But I'll tell you, there's also been very little coordination between even the Pentagon and the Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is really caught in a tough situation here where they don't want to deploy to LA. I've heard stories of Marine officers considering resigning their commission over these orders that they didn't sign up for. It may very well be unconstitutional. And just before the deployment, an order had to go out across the 1st Marine Division in California, just calling for anybody who had instructions and had experience in managing protests, because this is not something that the Marine Corps trains for. At one point, the Secretary of Defense, who we already know is the most incompetent Secretary of Defense in American history, couldn't even distinguish between Camp Pendleton on the coast of California and 29 Palms, a completely separate major Marine base on the interior, when he was describing where the troops were coming from. So this is uncoordinated from the top. It's also, as you said, uncoordinated at the bottom. And it's all a symptom of the fact that this is not a serious deployment of Marines. It's a political move by the president. It's politicizing the military for the president's goals. And that's dangerous, not just for the Marine Corps, not just for the LA police and the protesters on the ground. It's dangerous for the institutions of our democracy.
Congressman Seth Moulton, thank you so much for coming on The Weekend.